All right. Now we go back 30 years. NWA Championship Wrestling. I was 10.
I had just turned 10 the month before.
My wife was unborn.
Yeah. What's your wife's birthday?
November 23rd, 86.
Oh, this is exactly 1 year before she was born.
That's right.
How about that?
No, September 23rd, sorry.
Oh. Still, I don't mean to get graphic with you, Brian, but she had not yet been conceived.
No.
No.
Maybe she was conceived during this show. During this black
match. Barge match or Black Cat.
Yeah.
Showed clips of the Four Horsemen, not using that name, but it was Ric Flair, the Andersons, and Tully Blanchard. Or as David Crockett referred to them, these four guys. They were menacing Magnum TA and Dusty Rhodes when the Road Warriors ran out to make it a fair fight, and so, of course, the Horsemen backed down. That was the clip from a prior show. Opening match was Terry Taylor versus the Black Cat with David Crockett on commentary.
Vinny, in your career, you never did any studio wrestling, did you?
Can't say that I did.
I did. In Portland.
I have wrestled before many crowds much smaller than this one.
Hell yeah.
But they were not in studios. They were in much larger buildings.
This was every studio wrestling show there ever was.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a ring. There's a bunch of people there. Cameras.
I would have guessed about 150, no more than that.
Yep.
And they squeeze them all on two sides of the ring. And the other side of the ring is just nothing over there. And the fourth side of the ring is it's facing the commentary area.
Yeah.
Where they do commentary and interviews.
And you're doing television, and so it's just a bunch of nothing happening matches and a couple angles. And there's a big-ass long sheet with all of the matches, and you just see your name and the other guy's name, and you're told, like, so-and-so's getting his hand raised. 2 minutes. You go over one spot, and you get out there, and you do your match, and you go to the back, and it's like, wow, that was awesome. That was his show, top to bottom. Terry Taylor versus the Black Cat.
Yes.
Taylor, the national heavyweight champion.
There were about 50 belts floating in and out of this territory from time to time.
That's right.
And Terry Taylor had one of them.
They wrestled. They exchanged holds. And then Terry Taylor won with a superplex. And that was all she wrote.
It was a fine squash match.
1 minute. Maybe two.
May I talk about David Crockett?
Well, you can try. I'll jump in here pretty soon.
All right.
This guy. God bless him. Let's start with that.
I'm sure he's a nice guy.
I'm sure he's a great guy.
I'm sure he showed up for work on time every day.
That I'm not sure of.
He was so horrible.
Oh, my God.
Okay, there's a worse segment later when he had to try to pontificate on the Flair Rhodes feud and he tried to cut a promo, and he got lost several times. But here, just calling a match.
Oh, I was actually jumping forward to when he was pontificating.
You can do that too.
But go ahead and call the match.
Just crying out move names. I mean, crying out, screaming move names. And if he didn't know what else to say, he would just say, "Look at him. Look at him. Look at him," all the time.
Oh, that got worse later.
I cannot say, if I'm being 100% honest, he was so much worse than Michael Cole. Now, worse does not mean less entertaining, because at least this man had enthusiasm.
That is true.
He thought every babyface was the best wrestler in the world, and he thought every heel was the most dastardly villain he'd ever seen.
Yes.
So at least he cared. But God, he was terrible. Tony Schiavone and David Crockett. Oh, this is the segment.
Yeah, this is it right
It
here.
was right here. They were talking about the Horseman feud and hanging out together. And they were trying what sounds like a very simple idea. Trying to say that they did not understand why a great wrestler like Ric Flair would resort to such underhanded and violent tactics that he had been doing lately.
You're already better than David Crockett.
I know.
Who did this for a living. Although
I'm
I guess
well
you do as
aware
well. You know,
that I'm better than David Crockett.
Here's what I have to say in defense of David Crockett. If you watch a lot of old studio wrestling shows from the 70s and the 80s, there were a lot of guys like David Crockett. There were a lot of guys who really you would not consider very good at their jobs. There were commentators who kind of sucked. There were announcers who kind of sucked. There were all sorts of people that kind of sucked. I think part of the issue is that there are some guys today that are scripted, and they can perform their script just fine. Triple H, for example. Guy reads his scripts just fine. He can go out there and talk for 20 minutes. He's got a script. I don't need to see it every week, but the guy can do it.
Sure.
These guys just had to go out here and wing it.
That's true.
They had an hour, and I guess 2 hours, if you take out the commercials. Mm-hmm. They had a 2-hour show, a 2-hour studio show, with a bunch of nothing matches, and they had to build up the main angles in Starrcade. The problem was he just rambled on and on and on.
I use the word, in fact, I brought that up in my notes here. When I'm recapping Raw, I use the word rambled a lot. Rambled is not what they're doing on Raw.
No.
Droning, perhaps.
Droning is, yes.
They're going on far too long. David Crockett, stream of consciousness rambling is what this was. I think he would have an easier time doing a 500-pound bench press than completing a sentence.
Yeah, like Dave does stream of conscious for 15 straight minutes, but it's compelling.
Sure.
Not David Crockett.
No.
I'm talking Dave Meltzer can.
Yeah.
David Crockett can't even get a word out. Like, I was just yelling, just spit it out, dude. What are you trying to say? Just
any kind
say
of point.
The words. Yeah. Nice guy.
Suddenly, this got awesome. They cut to a bit where Bill Apter was sitting in a chair, Ric Flair was sitting in another chair, and Apter was interviewing Flair. And behind them, through the magic of TV, Dusty Rhodes was on the screen cutting a promo on Flair.
In front of them. Because we were looking at their backs.
I see.
Yes.
That's fine.
They were watching the TV, I'll give them that.
They were watching the TV.
You could not see Ric Flair's face. He was back to the camera.
But the great thing, the best thing about this was, it's not like they lowered a TV from the ceiling. They put the image on via TV magic. So the whole time this is going on, Apter and Flair were pretending to watch this promo.
Yes.
Staring at the NWA logo, whatever they had on the wall.
It was, as they called it back then, a blue screen.
Yes.
Today, a green screen.
Yes. So Dusty's cutting this promo. He's running Flair down, and Flair loses his mind. And he jumps to his feet, and he begins to cut a promo on Dusty. And as soon as he starts to talk, the Dusty promo fades away, and we get at least 30 seconds of irate Ric Flair screaming at a blank wall.
Yeah.
This was so awesome.
It was great. Ric Flair cut a promo on a wall.
A wall.
And it was a better promo than anything I've seen on Raw in years, I think.
Oh, yeah.
This promo that he cut on the wall.
And don't mean the WCW wrestler, the wall. This was a literal wall.
Yeah. You know what's funny is before it happened, they said, hey, we're going to go to this footage or whatever. They threw to it, as they say in television. And as they threw to it, I believe David Crockett said, we're about to see Ric Flair yelling at a wall.
It's something along those lines.
And then we saw Ric Flair yelling at a wall.
They weren't hiding it. Don Kernodle versus Don Turner.
Well, let's just get to the... no, you're jumping way ahead. First off...
I did jump way ahead.
Flair and Dusty are on a collision course. That's a key to this whole thing because Starrcade is coming up. And it's Ric Flair versus Dusty Rhodes. Flair broke his ankle, and Dusty is going for his revenge. He's going for his third NWA World Heavyweight title.
Let's not gloss over the ankle breaking, by the way.
Yes.
Ric Flair was the world champion, and though he was an evil man, it was his duty to face other evil men like the Russians.
Yeah.
So he was defending the world championship in a steel cage match against the evil Nikita Koloff. And the Russians were about to finish him off, and Dusty Rhodes hates Ric Flair, but damn it, he's an American. So he hits the cage to chase the Russians away, and they flee. And Ric Flair pays this man back by having his buddies Ole and Arn run out. They latch the cage door, and they triple team him to death and break his fucking ankle. These bastards.
It's awesome.
Yes. So Dusty's out, taken out. He is coming back. There was I watched a few of these over the weekend, just bits and pieces. They had a bit with an interview with his doctor. They had his special custom-made boot to protect his ankle that he's wearing. He has, if you look at the clip they showed, he had one of his regular cowboy wrestling boots on, and the other boot was just very white and bulky. That's a special boot. And
the demon is in that boot.
He made his comeback match, and he squashed against Mike Davis, beating him with the figure four, Ric Flair's own weapon. And then Crockett interviewed Dusty. This was not done in the studio show. This was done somewhere else. And Dusty cuts this great promo about how he wants revenge on the Andersons and Flair. Talks about the thousands of letters the fans have written to him about coming back and being world champion again.
I'll bet you anything that's true.
I'm sure it is.
I'll bet thousands and thousands of letters were sent in for Dusty Rhodes.
Handwritten letters.
Yeah.
He says Flair is yella. Then he has the great line, because they were to sort of note, this boot is steel reinforced, but it is not a weapon. It is about protection. And then Dusty gets a little bit of twinkle in his eye. He says, if there's a devil in that boot, Ric Flair, you put it there. Implying, I'm going to kick you in the face with this fucking steel-toed boot, you fucker.
It was awesome.
Yes.
Between the Flair promo and the Dusty promo, one thing we can conclude is that promos were better in 1985.
Yes. That is fact. Not surprising, but fact. Okay, now, Don Kernodle versus Don Turner. Two things I loved about this. Actually, I take it back. Three things I loved about this. The very first thing they did, Kernodle grabs him and body slams him. And Turner sits up, and he puts a hand on the small of his back, and he closes his eyes, and he puts his other hand in the air. And the ref asks him, do you want to give it up?
Yeah.
Have you been body slammed into submission?
I just love it because, like, Kevin Owens always does a deal where he'll put a man in a headlock, and he will command the referee to ask the man if he wants to give up in his headlock. Mm-hmm. That's not what happened here.
No.
The referee, on his own accord, saw that a man had been slammed on his back.
It is my duty as an official.
And he had to check on him.
To protect the fighter.
Would you like to give up?
Don Turner, you have been body slammed in 5 seconds. Have you had enough? So Kernodle, they were talking to me about him being an amateur wrestler, and they proceeded to wrestle. And usually when we say wrestling, actual chain wrestling in a pro wrestling match, we mean they are exchanging holds and transitioning from one hold or lock to another, or doing various takedowns. No. Don Kernodle got on top of Don Turner. He laid across his chest and tried to pin both his shoulders to the mat, and Turner rolled back and forth trying to keep both shoulders off the mat.
That's right.
They fucking wrestled. They mentioned here the Starrcade was going to be such a big event, some cities would even have it available on closed circuit TV.
Wow.
This is the future.
Holy smokes.
And finally, Kernodle won with a power slam and a top rope lariat they called the American Cannon.
Yeah. Fun.
Very fun.
That was real fun. The Barbarian and a man named Stony Burke. Not to be confused with Stony Edwards.
No.
Who Vinny wrestled in his first ever match.
Yes.
One of the worst matches of all time.
Yes.
I wish we could go back and find that match.
So you got it somewhere.
Because
it
is very possible that there are squash matches on this show that may have been worse than you and Stony Edwards.
That is a fair question.
I'm pretty sure that Pez Watley's performance was worse than either you or Stony Edwards in your first match. But I digress. Stony Burke against the Barbarian in a squash match. Barbarian looked exactly the same as he did in 1996, except he had face paint on here. And he still grunted and huzzah.
Yeah.
That whole gimmick.
He made noise the entire time.
They knew that this would be great, unlike many of the other squashes on this show. So they gave him, it seemed 5 minutes of Barbarian just killing him.
Just clubbing him.
It was so enjoyable. I loved it.
Barbarian looked exactly like Sheamus with a tan and face paint.
And Tongan.
Well, I just said tan. He beat the hell out of the Stony Burke for a long time.
Vinny, if you tan a long time, you don't become Tongan.
I guess that's true. I wouldn't know.
Clearly.
But Paul Jones was Barbarian's manager. And at one point, Barbarian threw Stony Burke to the floor and then took the ref away. And Paul Jones went to interfere. And as we have noted many, many times, Paul Jones sucked. So by the time Paul Jones interfered, the referee had turned back. The referee sees Paul Jones rakes the man's eyes. He can't call for the DQ, so all he can do is order Jones back to the corner, and Jones defends himself by screaming, "He jumped me!" That made me laugh.
Vinny's feud with the number one Paul Jones continues here in 2016.
So Barbarian destroyed this man. The crowd, by the way, all 150 people, nuts. He went nuts for this carnage and violence.
Oh, yeah.
And Barbarian finished him off with a power slam and a diving headbutt.
Awesome.
Crockett interviewed Flair.
I got to talk about this. Flair always talked about how he was a god of wrestling. He was, here in the Omni. Grown men worshiping Ric Flair in the middle of this promo. Ric Flair, by the way, who, as you noted earlier, destroyed Dusty Rhodes after Dusty Rhodes had saved him from evil Russians. He broke the man's leg. They are on a collision course. The diabolical heel Ric Flair, who is such a dick. If you watch the show from top to bottom, Flair is a dick the whole time. He's loved and cheered. Because the idea that there's a new audience watching WWE nowadays that is going to decide who they want to cheer and who they want to boo, and they're going to boo guys that the fans are supposed to cheer and vice versa. No, it's been going on like this forever. Ric Flair cheered like a god during this heel promo in 1985.
The promo was, don't get me wrong, it was a great Ric Flair promo.
They all are.
They all are. Aside from being appalled the announcers would question his actions and motivations lately, he mostly talked about how great he was and how terrible Dusty was. And if you've seen a Ric Flair promo and you know how great they are, you know how great this one was. What made this one different was not Flair, nor was it David Crockett. There was one particular Ric Flair fan. He wasn't even a fan. Ric Flair had a hype man. You know how sometimes guys will cut a promo on Raw and they'll finish a sentence and the whole crowd will go, "What?" This guy was doing that for Flair, only instead of saying "what" every time, he would react to whatever Flair said.
Yes.
Ric Flair would say, "I'm the world champion." And you hear the guy go, "Yeah." And Ric Flair would say, "I'm the best wrestler in the world." And the guy would say, "You tell him, Rick." And Flair says, "I have the biggest ego in the world." And the fan says, "Yeah." And then Flair says, "Dusty Rhodes, you say you have the biggest ego in the world." And the fan says, "No." And then finally, Flair just wrapped up just some classic Ric Flair wheeling, dealing, styling, and profiling stuff, and he made his exit. This was awesome.
This was great.
They very quickly ran down the Starrcade card.
They did, but you know what I found amazing about this segment? They ran down, there were like 13 matches on this Starrcade. 13 matches from 2 different locations. And they're running down the matches. And they're so excited about everything.
Absolutely.
And when you watch this show, this was kind of like a go-home show. They interviewed all sorts of guys that were on the Starrcade card. Everybody from Ric Flair to Black Bart. Actually, they didn't interview Black Bart. Who they interviewed?
Ron Bass.
Ron Bass, that's right. Interviewed all of these guys. And it really hit me that if you were a fan in 1985 going into this Starrcade and you were watching this show, look at all of the different options that you had.
Good point.
Look at all of the various stars that you could get behind.
You had Cowboys.
You had Cowboys.
Russians.
Ric
Post-apocalyptic
Flair.
warriors.
Exactly.
A guy from Oregon.
Exactly. And they're building up all the matches, and it just really hit me. If you're a WWE fan today and you don't care about the main event, do you really need to watch the show?
Nope.
Because they don't do jack shit for the rest of the card.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't even promote the card. We had a Survivor Series pay-per-view with 2 Survivor Series matches. They didn't tell us who was in them. Meanwhile, in 1985, they built up the entire card. They made you want to care about everything. And you know what? Maybe you didn't care about everything. But if you didn't care about Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes, maybe you cared about Ron Bass.
Sure.
Maybe you cared about superstar Billy Graham and the Barbarian, who are having a match on this show, which sounds fucking amazing. Just incredible. Like, that's why everyone's so depressed nowadays, is because if you don't like Roman Reigns, now you hate the show.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
That's about it, actually.
That's what this company has become.
You know what? That's actually a good goddamn point.
It is. If you don't like Roman Reigns or you don't like John Cena, it's like, well, fuck this. I don't want to watch it then.
Yeah.
Here, you don't like Ric Flair? Who gives a shit? Watch Superstar Graham or the Road Warriors.
Yes.
Or Manny Fernandez. Or any of these guys. They tried to make every single match important.
If you didn't like the main event guy, you would have your favorite guy, and your favorite guy would get a chance to shine.
That's right.
Yes. Whereas now, if your favorite guy is not one of the top 2 or 3, he's a geek.
That's exactly right.
People loved Zack Ryder. And with the very rare exceptions, they never got to see Zack Ryder do anything cool. So they tuned out.
I mean, imagine, if the fans like Zack Ryder, the idea should be, okay, well, you know what? We don't think he's going to be in the main event, but hey, let's let people like him.
Let's have him win.
Instead, it was, we don't think he should be a main eventer, so we don't want you to like him. So we're going to bury him and then take him off television.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
So I did not write down every match, but what I got from this was Sam Houston versus Crusher Khrushchev for the vacant Mid-Atlantic Championship, a bull rope match between Black Bart and Ron Bass, Billy Graham versus the Barbarian.
Can't even imagine.
I'm pretty sure they said this would be both a pro wrestling match and an arm wrestling match, both of which sound phenomenal. The Andersons versus Billy Jack Haynes and Wahoo McDaniel for the national tag titles. I wrote the Koloffs versus the Russians. I think one of those is supposed to be the Rock and Roll Express versus the Russians for the tag team championship. Tully Blanchard versus Arn Anderson in an I Quit. Arn Anderson. Tully Blanchard versus Magnum TA in an I Quit cage match for the TV title. A match that, believe it or not, I have never seen.
Wow.
I will have to amend that soon. And of course, Dusty versus Flair in the main event. I know that's actually got all bungled. Superstar Billy Graham versus Tony Zane.
There's some good news. The good news is that Billy Graham was no longer a ninja. He was back to being Superstar.
I'd forgotten about that.
He looked exactly like Hulk Hogan. But you know what's funny? Superstar Billy Graham in 1985, with his tie-dye and horseshoe beard, looked exactly like Hulk Hogan in 2015.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
that's a rough, rough life.
Yes.
He was horrible.
He had yellow and red tie-dye, way over tan, bald with the Fu Manchu dyed blonde. They had a very, very bad match.
Dude, I would have a match with Superstar.
All right.
It would suck, but he would not touch me.
That's true.
He would be as light as a feather.
What I got out of this more than anything was Tony Zane was a TV jobber. He was skinny fat. Billy Graham gave him a terrible Irish whip into the turnbuckles. You should have seen this guy take this corner. He threw himself in these turnbuckles, and he recoiled his body back and forth in violent tremors. And I thought to myself, if I had been born 30 years ago, I could have been Tony Zane.
Could have been. He could have been Vinny Zane.
Vince Zane. Graham won with a bear hug.
David Crockett during this match was Vince McMahon in 1996. All he could talk about was Billy Graham's rippling muscles.
Biceps on top of biceps.
Look at that. Look at the rippling biceps. Look at them rippling muscles.
Funny part.
Look at his shitty match.
The best part was I'm staring. I was mesmerized by Tony Zane and his skinny fatness. And David, talking about Superstar, says, look at his stomach muscles. And I am looking at I'm looking at
Tony Zane.
Tony Zane's flab, thinking, where? I don't see any.
He was not talking about him.
No.
Fat, pale, and totally normal looking.
Yes.
An awesome jobber.
Oh, the best. The other thing about this is especially true by the end. They're jobbers. They were not, up and comers. They were not green rookies. They took dudes with no bodies and no tans, bad haircut. Many of them looked barely trained and threw them into the ring to get beaten.
See, that's what I was going to talk about later. I'll talk about it now. I need to ask Dave about this. Did these jobbers know they had no hope? Had they resigned themselves to the fact that they were never going to be anything? They were perfectly happy being jobbers. And so they went out of their way to look normal, ugly, pale, and fat. Not one jobber had a tan.
No.
Not one jobber was lean.
No.
Not one jobber had anything resembling a haircut you would not see your average accountant sport.
Right.
Every single one of them was as absolutely generic. They all looked like out-of-shape fans. Every one of them.
Yes.
They had to have known, right?
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't care?
It's payday.
It's just like a group of men with no drive
I guess
that
so.
enjoy getting in the ring,
Just taking a beating once in a while.
being on television, and going back to work at the library. Is that what this was?
I guess so. Dave would know better than I would.
I got to ask him. I got to get one of them on the show, for crying out loud.
Tony Zane did not think one day I'll be world champion main eventing the Army. No. Tony Zane said I will be losing 3-minute matches on TBS studios for the rest of my life.
And I guess he was totally happy with it. More power to him, I guess.
We're all dealt certain fates in life, Brian.
Hey, you know what?
Play the card you're dealt.
Vinny, I've said this a million times. You can try. Okay? Not one of these guys tried.
No.
There was no effort involved. Unless the effort was to make sure you were always a jobber.
They learned it just enough they could fall down and not die.
God, these guys. It was something else.
So it made it so great, though. The only truly good match on the show. And what a match this was. Manny Fernandez versus Buddy Landel.
Fernandez's hair achieved something I thought not possible, which was to have a worse haircut than Enzo Amore. He had it may have been a perm, I'm not sure, but it was definitely a mullet. And he was so proud of his mullet that he went to the barber, or the hairstylist, whatever you would call it, and he had the bottom part of his mullet bleached.
Yes. Just the long part.
What?
He thought it was cool. Who are you to question the Raging Bull?
I'm Brian Alvarez, and I've had a lot of bad haircuts.
Well,
Nothing like this.
You got one more to add to the
Nothing
list.
approaching this. It was so bad. Landel was out there blatantly being Ric Flair.
Yeah, on the same show.
I mean, same look, worked exactly the same.
Same nickname,
Same bumps.
same finishing hold,
Everything.
same chops.
Yeah.
You don't do a flop. That's the only thing you didn't do. Anyway, this match ruled. It's the most basic pro wrestling match in the world. People say, what is wrestling? You can do a lot worse than say this. Manny Fernandez was a babyface. He wasn't a babyface because he kissed ass to the fans. He wasn't a babyface because he was a pretty guy who sold a lot of t-shirts. He was a babyface because he was there to fight. And he stood in the middle of the ring, fists clenched, ready for action all the time. Buddy Landel was a heel. He wasn't a heel because he told fans to shut up.
Although he did.
Well, he did.
He wouldn't stop talking.
He wasn't a heel because he cheated, although he did that too. He was a heel because whenever Manny was ready for action, Buddy was cowering in the ring, trying to find a way out of this mess. Cowering in the corner, I should say, trying to find a way out of this mess. It was very even for the first 5 minutes or so. Although in the end, Manny would almost always be on top. But he would come back here or there, and then Manny would cut him off. And when they did their high spots, it was just stuff like drop down, leapfrog, arm drag. It was not nothing you would, you'll watch any Lucha Underground match and you'll see 10,000 things more athletic than this. But when these guys fucking moved, they were running the ropes, going as fast as they could, and hitting each other as hard as they could, on shoulder tackles and stuff. There is an intensity to this old wrestling that is gone from Raw, where guys are clearly going through the motions.
Yeah, Raw's, no, it's not going through the motions. It's a performance.
Yes.
You are trying to perform. It is closer to Cirque du Soleil.
Yes. Or
than
ice skating.
A fight.
Yeah. These men were in a fight. It also helped. This is a much smaller ring than WWE has. So when they were running, they were going rope to rope to rope quickly. And because there were high spots, by the way, because they were moving so quickly and the high spots were so intense, even as a young fan, as a young boy watching wrestling, I was aware of what rest holds were and the purpose they served. So when guys were blown up, they needed a chance to catch their breath, they slap out a chin lock. When these guys here, they were working so hard, when they put on a rest hold, you felt like they have earned that rest. And in fact, I, as a fan, I could also use a rest. So thank you for doing that. Manny ended up bleeding from his terribly scarred forehead. I don't even think there was a spot. I think it just started spontaneously bleeding.
Sure, yeah. He wakes up like that sometimes.
I guess. There were a lot of chin locks, and the blood ended up smeared all over Buddy's shoulders, made it even better. And then Fernandez makes his big comeback, and they're trading punches, and Manny gets the better of that. He's running wild with forearms, and he goes up top. He tries a middle rope knee drop, but Landell dodges, and Fernandez crashes knees first into the mat, and Landell pounces with the figure four. Well, it appears to be the end. They fight back and forth for a minute, and then the bell rings, and it is a time limit draw. It was a beautiful wrestling match.
This was really good. It was a very good match. What was it called? What kind of series?
They had a name for it. They mentioned it briefly at the beginning and then talked more about it later. Something championship series. I
wasn't clear about what this
don't know what's
championship
going on and what championship
series
line
was, but it seemed like these were the main event caliber matches that we're going to get every week that are going to go very, very long.
Yes.
And then, a little bit later on, Jim Crockett Jr. comes out, and he announces the match for next week. And I thought, oh, well, this was a good main event style match. I wonder what the match next week is going to be. And he announces next week it will be the Road Warriors versus Black Bart and Thunderfoot. I don't expect a 15-minute time limit draw on that one.
Nor I. Also, that match, they explained, that's the match, but they said this is going to be a battle of managers. What? Because both teams have managers, I guess? All right. So Terry Taylor had worked the opener, and an hour had gone by. He had showered, cleaned up, put on a suit to come out for this promo.
That's right.
Like a true pro athlete.
He's going to go out on the town.
That too. He thanked all the fans for supporting him. He said he had a match with Buddy Landell at Starrcade. He vowed his super suplex would be too much for Landell.
The super suplex.
That's what he called it.
I just loved it because Terry Taylor's young, good-looking guy, good worker. Vince McMahon saw him, thought he'd make a great chicken. Like, can you watch this interview and not have that go through your mind?
That's all you can ever think about.
That this man looked at Terry Taylor, a very handsome man.
Oh, yeah.
Who could work, cut a good promo.
Do good talk.
Looked great.
He was a great heel, too.
And he thought, this man will be my Red Rooster. So it's funny when people go, I think Vince has lost his touch. I think Vince has lost his mind. His business has passed him by. Have you forgotten the shit Vince used to do?
He did the Red Rooster. So he finishes his promo talking about Landell, and he says, oh, by the way, I also hope the Rock and Rolls win their match, and of course I'll be cheering for Dusty Rhodes. That's the other great thing about wrestling in this era. All the baby faces were friends. All the heels were friends.
Yeah.
We'll get to that with Flair later.
And they all support each other.
And they all support each other. They all got
That's the time he had a Dolph Ziggler promo, and he goes, I'm really rooting for Dean Ambrose in that main event championship match.
Yeah.
Never.
No.
Everybody hates everybody else in WWE today.
Pretty
there
much.
are literally no friends unless you're brothers.
It's about it. Or you both have masks.
Sure.
So
another Ric Flair promo.
there was yet another Ric Flair promo. Not that I'm complaining. But they explained the Warriors match for next week. And then Flair comes out to say, look, if you want this championship series thing to be important, you got to make me a part of it. He talked for a while about how he was going to beat up Dusty. There's more Flair to come.
Black Bart and Rocky King had a battle. It was very bad. Fucked up an arm drag.
The best thing was King's running wild. And it's drop kicks and hip tosses, but it looks cool. And he tries this arm drag, and it goes wrong, and Bart ends up on top, and you could almost see him think, well, I'll just take over now. He start beating him.
The thing that I was thinking when I was watching it was, it's Black Bart versus Rocky King. And all I could think was, who's the star? And it turned out it was Black Bart.
I'm afraid so.
I was like, what? Wrong man was the star in this match.
That's true. It got very boring once Black Bart was on offense. He won with a leg drop off the middle rope.
And this led to a Ron Bass promo.
Yes.
I thought this was a hell of a promo.
You're not wrong.
Hyped up a bull rope match with Black Bart. And this was where I was really thinking, there's so many characters on this show. And there's so many options for different matches that you can be excited about at Starrcade. Not just the main event.
He explained he had once called Bart a friend, but now Bart had teamed with J.J. Dillon. They had vowed to put Bass out of wrestling. He said, I'm not going to get mad. I'm going to get even. I'm going to do it with this bull rope. He explained how the rope was a big, heavy, rope, and it had a cowbell in the middle, and they were going to be tied to either end of it. And he was going to take Bart out, and then after he got Bart, he got 5 minutes with J.J. Dillon. This was one big, angry cowboy.
Oh, yeah.
Road Warriors came out for a promo. They ran down Flair, vowed to take him and the Andersons out in Philadelphia. Hawk ran down the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, said you would never last in Chicago. Animal called out Nikita Koloff, warned him, don't you ever use my name on TV. They sounded really pissed. Billy Jack Haynes versus Jim Jeffers.
Jim Jeffers was his name.
Not Jeff Jimmers.
Jim Jeffers.
Jim Jeffers.
Hayes had Oregon on his ass.
Mm-hmm.
Won. Full Nelson. And then he did this promo, and it's such a babyface promo. He says, want to say hi to my dad in Oregon?
Yeah.
Humble babyface. NWA is #1. He says it. Man, they broke Dusty Rhodes' legs. When I get in there, I'm going to use my full Nelson. I'm going to break a neck. And then he apologized for yelling so much during his promo.
That's right. The other thing of this was there were a lot of great, big, strong men in this show. The Road Warriors. We saw clips of Nikita. We saw the Barbarian. Billy Jack Haynes' physique was so many levels above everyone else.
Oh, yeah. Best shape of his life, he said.
And I'm sure it's a coincidence that he was in WrestleMania like a year and a half later.
Yeah.
He was the first guy to end up working for Vince McMahon. And yes, he did note this sport's dangerous enough you don't need to intentionally hurt a man like the Andersons did. And then he vowed to intentionally break their necks.
Well, revenge.
Mm-hmm. Got a video package on the Russian team. This is mostly
Russians killing each other.
Nikita
killing
Koloff
guys.
killing Americans. Mostly Nikita just clubbering and clotheslining dudes, and one jobber managed to take the flip inside-out bump, and they showed this in super, super slow-mo like he'd been killed.
You know what? It was because it was the mid-'80s, and this was VHS tape, and they slowed it down.
Yes.
And literally, you could have put this on a Faces of Death VHS and sold millions.
The great thing was they showed the move in super slow-mo, but they played the commentary from the match at regular speed and synced it up so that as he landed almost on his head is exactly when David Crockett screamed,
Yeah.
and that made it awesome. You know what wasn't awesome?
Oh.
They had a terrible 6-man tag team match.
Can't even believe this occurred.
Ron Bass and Pez Whatley and the Italian Stallion were the stars against Carl Stiles and Kent Glover and Larry Clark.
Pretty sure everybody in this match sucked.
I'm quite certain.
It went 1 minute, thankfully, maybe 2. Pez did a flying headbutt.
Allegedly.
It had to be explained to me because I thought it was just a diving clothesline or
He
something.
flew through the air and they collided, and we were told it was a headbutt.
The only thing of note here was they put up the mailing address so that you could write letters to the stars. No internet.
No,
We put up a mailing address.
not even a hotline.
No.
Just a place you could write letters and send postcards and letters to. And they noted some of the letters they had and wished happy anniversary to two fans who watched the show. That was so sweet.
And then,
Oh, my God.
oh my God, this guy appears on screen. And I'm like, is that Billy Kidman or his dad?
This guy is the best possible way to describe him. There's
This guy.
this guy. Kind of think of it, he looked a little bit like Scott Baio
Kinda, yeah.
with a terrible haircut.
His name was Denny Brown, and he was the World Junior Heavyweight Champion.
And he had a cape.
And he cut the most hideous promo. His job was to come on television and hype up the matches at Starrcade. There's no way he was sober. He mumbled through a bunch of matches.
I'm not certain he was awake.
He fucked up half of them, just like you did earlier in the show.
Yes.
In fact, when you fucked up all those Starrcade matches earlier in this show, you did a better job than Denny Brown, World Junior Heavyweight Champion. And then he was wished well and went on his merry way.
He had nothing of his own to promote.
Oh, my God.
This was...
This was hideous.
I'm trying to think if I've ever seen a promo that was definitely worse.
Oh, I'm sure there have been.
I'm sure there have been, but this is...
I haven't seen one worse this year.
That's probably true. All right, there you go. This was very, very terrible. Sam Houston versus my new favorite jobber name of all time. Golden Terror.
That's right, the Golden Terror.
Well, they called him the Golden Terror. The graphic just read Golden Terror, which I like even better.
Apparently, the Golden Terror was a multi-generational jobber gimmick. There have been Golden Terrors dating back to like the 40s and 50s.
That is awesome.
Just various Golden Terrors.
Like the Phantom.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this guy was a terror. You should have seen him take a corner.
He was a bad
my
wrestler.
God.
So Sam Houston's out there. He's very skinny. He's being this skinny young babyface. And Ric Flair comes out for more talking. Again, not a complaint. And here's where he went into the mode where all the heels were his friends. He said, you know, this Sam Houston, he's a great young wrestler, but he's not that level of myself. He's not able to hang with the Andersons or Buddy Landel, or I don't like the Russians, but they destroy this young man. Talking about how great all the heels were. So Houston hits a bulldog, and he appears to have the match won. But Golden Terror gets one of his golden terrible feet on the ropes. So Houston tries the move again, but Terror shoves him off. Houston bounces off the ropes, they bonk heads, and they both go down. Flair then springs into action, and he grabs Sam Houston, hits a suplex on the cement floor. David Crockett is hysterical too strong a word?
He was
Beside himself.
He was up in arms.
Yes. There has been an assault, an attempt to injure this brave young Sam Houston by the world heavyweight champion. And
Tony is screaming.
Tony's screaming.
Flair, you're the champion. Why do you need to do things like this?
So then, it may have been Pez Whatley, but 3 or 4 other guys run out to make sure Flair doesn't do anything else. And Flair is completely unmoved by them. He just keeps screaming his promo saying, what just happened to Sam Houston, that is very likely to happen to Dusty Rhodes at Starrcade.
Well, it's awesome because after he gives him the suplex, Sam Houston gets counted out.
Yeah, the Golden Terror won.
The Golden Terror wins the match, and Flair is such an asshole that he has given the man a suplex behind the referee's back on the concrete floor, nearly killing the man. And then he calmly gets on commentary and starts berating the man for not being man enough to get back into the ring.
That's right.
So great. Yelling, "Where's Dusty? Where's Dusty now?" What an awesome heel.
Yes. That's what we've learned at the end of this day, everyone. Ric Flair in the 80s was a great heel.
And literally, that's how the show went off the air.
Yes,
They all of a sudden just played the graphic.
What a great show.
This show was amazing. Every Sunday night, everybody. I cannot wait for next week's show.
I already want to look at what the lineup is. Probably shouldn't.
Don't do it yet.
Yeah.
It'll be a surprise. This is correct, right? This is exactly... It's close. But they were...
Today is the 29th.
I know.
So it's technically a year and a week ago.
So we may have to skip ahead one.
May have to skip ahead one.
All right. Well, we'll alert everybody as to what we're going to watch next time. But I want to just go 30 years ago this week, since we already fucked up Nitro, and instead of doing 20 years, we're doing 19 years because we started a year early. But I didn't know if those Nitros were going to stay, so I got on them quick.
Yeah.
Or we could just watch that whole year over again, starting in
I don't
January.
think it's a good idea.
Anyway, everybody.